The TrekWorks YouTube channel is sponsored by HDA ModelWorks, suppliers of scale lighting products, detail accessory parts, and complete model kits. Visit HDAModelWorks.com today.
Hi everybody, and welcome to part 11 of our 1/350 scale Polar Lights Enterprise build. We've been moving right along with this, you guys. We're on the downhill run. We've got quite a bit done on this. The last video especially, I apologize for being kind of long on that one. We covered a lot of ground. Got the nacelles all put on, got our wiring completed there, got our boards for our Bassard effect put in from Tenna Controls. So as I mentioned at the end of that last video, we're down to here to where we're just kind of doing some of the detail parts now. So I'm going to be doing two things here initially for you guys. I'm going to be putting on a couple of these little parts. We have these little manifolds that go here at the back on the nacelles. I've already went ahead and placed these. They basically go on the same way these are going to. I took my hobby knife and scraped off a bare spot on the areas where they make contact. So we're gluing plastic to plastic. These weren't painted on the back side. And the same thing with these. And now you can see on these they have a small and a big hole for the pegs. So you've got to make sure when you put these on, you put them in the right direction. I believe the larger peg goes towards the rear. So let's go ahead and get these put on. After we get this done, I've got the model upside down for a reason. First of all, it was easy to do these like that, but my client Tim wanted some light weathering on this model. So we're going to be doing some work around the front area of the deflector housing with some paint. I'm going to find my spot here, guys. There we go. Caught it. It's just easier to get at it from this. We're going to make a little bit of shadowing around this with some copper color. We're going to make a couple little faint streaks that go back. These are what you see on the effect work that they did on the big 11-foot ship. We've got a couple little streaks in the same color that run on the bottom of these little manifolds right here, and then a few on the leading edges of the pylons and such. So we'll just be kind of attacking it from this angle. It's just a little easier to do. Now the copper paint that I'm using is the Craft acrylic paint, and one thing I'll point out on that is that I've learned through experience is that you want to put that on over top of this clear sealer. If you put any kind of clear sealer over the top of it, it changes color and it looks more like it loses its copper effect. It looks more like a red instead. So you don't want it looking like that. And it'll be just fine on the top of this. We're going to be dusting it on super light, you know, so it'll stay on there just fine and it won't rub off or anything like that. So let me keep going with my getting these put on. I'm just putting a small drop of glue right in the center where I've got the paint scraped off. And then I just kind of work them around a little bit and get that rear hole lined up. There we go. They'll sit down on there nice and flush if you get them in the right spot. You'll feel them kind of click into place. I've gone ahead and painted all the other detail parts for the most part. So when we head over to the other bench in just a minute, I'll show you how all that turned out. Talk about the colors I used. I basically was going to use some primer to do these gray details, but the primer I had, it wound up being just a little bit darker than I liked. So I basically took some of my craft paint. I took some regular light gray, and I just dusted in, you know, I dropped in a couple of drops of black, and I just kept mixing it until I basically matched the color of the gray plastic parts. But rather than just leaving them bare, you know, where you could see where you sanded them, and you could see where the little white edges, where the burrs were and everything, where they were cut off of the sprue, I went ahead and painted them. So I just basically matched that color, and it looks just right. So I guess that's the way they intend it to be. Okay, those rear manifolds are glued on. And I'll give those just a couple of seconds to dry here. I'm going to set up my airbrush, and we're going to come over here and I'll talk to you about the kind of an airbrush I'm using, how I'm mixing up this paint. We're going to do this copper, and we're going to do a little bit of weathering. Now, I'm going to do a little bit around these manifolds here in the back too, so I want to make sure those are dry for a little bit and I don't blow them off when I'm trying to do my airbrushing there. So let me get that set up. We'll pause here and I'll get the camera a little bit closer to the front so you can see that work, and we'll go from there. Be right back. Okay guys, well I'm all set to dust on a little bit of weathering effects now onto the front area of the model here around the deflector housing. I'm going off of photos I have of the 11-footer, you know, the restoration job that they did. They just did a little bit of a hazing around this this whole kind of circle here, and a little bit on the front parts of these kind of details right here, and a little bit into the ribs on the side. So we're going to be really subtle with this, you guys. I'm not going to cake this on there. And the color that I'm using is this aged copper from Anita's. This is more of the craft paint. Now, it's really important that if you're going to use this craft paint, guys, like I pointed out several times here, you want to strain this stuff every time you spray it, especially when we're going to be doing fine kind of mist painting with our airbrush. Because if you have any kind of chunks in this, or it's too thick, or anything like that, it's going to come out all splattery and nasty, and it's going to ruin the effect that you're trying to create here. You want to create just a little bit of a fog, you know, an even looking mist of paint. You don't want it to be, you know, globs of paint splattering on there. So I can't tell you how critical that is. I've got this thinned down pretty good with just regular water, but I ran it through a, you know, a regular paint strainer. And so I've got it in my airbrush. Now, the airbrush that I'm using is an Iwata HP Eclipse, which for this purpose works great because it's a really fine tipped, it has a really small needle, and so it can do fine detail work like that. I don't use this brush at all for regular general painting because it just doesn't cover very well. It doesn't move a lot of paint. It's more suited for this kind of work, more artistic kind of detail work and shading and things like that. Now, I also have an Iwata Eclipse, or a just a standard Iwata Neo, I'm sorry. And this has a much larger needle in it, and it's just really suitable more for just general type spraying, so painting parts and things like that. But this is my go-to for this kind of work. Now, before I get going here, I'm gonna just do I've got like a piece of paper towel. I'm just gonna do a test spray here. You can see it paints a nice thin line, and it paints it very faint. I've got a lot more precise control over the amount of paint coming out of this than I do the other gun. So we're going to start off right here, and we're just going to kind of make a little, just a haze around that ring. Part of it I'm going to have to get from above, but you just want to catch this one. And I'm just going to go a little bit on the front of these details there. And now I want a couple little streaks going back, so I'm going to just kind of back off and kind of aim at this edge here and keep my hand straight and just kind of give it a quick little something like that, and just kind of let it carry back a little bit. And I want to make them just a little bit different, you know, each time. Okay. And again, it's very, very faint. And it looks really nice on the model. When you see the model with the shadow of the saucer over top of it, it gives it a nice little kind of a, you know, shadow or shading effect down there. And so we're going to do the same thing. Now, right here on the side, I noticed I did a little kind of dash right here on the side, so I'm just going to do a little spot right there by the front part of the pylon. And then the same thing, guys. I'm trying to get the right angle here. I'm going to make a couple of streaks on the pylon itself. Just letting it trail back like that. Try to keep them different lengths. Okay, nothing serious, just a little, you know. Tim wanted the weathering on this to be very light. So that's exactly what we're doing, okay? Now I noticed on the big model too, they also came around and did a little bit of shading right here next to these grills. So I'm just going to do a little bit of that. Very lightly, you guys, very lightly. Okay. So I'm going to try to spin her around here now. And kind of repeat the same process here. I'll go over here to this little spot right here. Just kind of a little spot that they did right there, which I thought was kind of interesting. We'll come over here and do these. It's just a little something. I personally think that a little bit of weathering on a model, even models that are supposed to look, you know, really pristine and everything, I think it just gives them a little bit more realistic look, you know. So now we had a few streaks on the front edges of these little manifolds right here, and kind of up onto the bassards. You'll see it if you look at the big pictures of the big restored ship. Okay, don't want to go too nuts. All right, so now in order to get the rest of it, I'm also going to be doing a little bit up on the top around these manifolds on the rear, and of course we got to do a little bit more on the top of the round part of the deflector housing, so I'm going to have to flip the model over for that. I'll go ahead and do that. I'll finish the rest of that off camera. You guys are kind of seeing the technique that I'm using for it, but again, keep your paint thin and keep your paint, you know, make sure you strain it if you're going to use this type of paint. You know, some of the other solvent-based paints aren't quite as bad, but any kind of paint that's been sitting around for a little while, it's going to have little particles in it that start to turn hard. So you're moving such a tiny amount, you know, through this little needle that any little bit of debris will really cause havoc. So we just try to, you know, try to avoid that. So, okay, guys, we're going to come back. I'll show you the model set up over on the, we'll have it turned over upside right. I'll have the other weathering finished on it, and then we're going to show you all the detail parts that we have painted. I'm going to cover with you what colors I used to paint them, and some little modifications you can do to some of those parts to make them fit better and things like that. And we'll start putting everything on. So we'll be right back with that. All right, you guys, I'm back with you again, and I've finished up doing a little bit of my weathering. It may be a little bit hard to see when we get closer towards the end here. I'll pick the camera up off the tripod and we'll hover around it a little bit and show you a little bit better detail. But I basically just finished up here on the top of the deflector dish, and then a little bit around the edges here, a couple little streaks on the pylon, or you know, on the nacelles, and just kind of blended everything in. And hopefully you're not seeing too much of it, because it should be really subtle, like I'm trying to do here. So but here you can see in front of you I've got all the detail parts all painted and ready to go, so we're going to go ahead and put all these on for you. I'll just explain a little bit about some of the things you can do to make your build go a little bit easier. These are pretty much straightforward, these little manifold parts here. They're painted the hull color to start with, and then some testers, regular testers silver. I just hand brush these on, you know, the little grill detail right there. Masked these off and painted our gray accent color, and started off with the regular hull color on these. So nothing fancy there, nothing fancy going on with these end caps. Painted these the same gray accent color. This is the hull color here at the back. Now these panels right here, which are the grills that go on the inboard side of the upright part of the pylons, there's 4 on each side. You want to sand the edges down of these on all 4 corners just slightly. You know, I used some regular 320 grit paper and just scuffed them down. First of all, to get the burrs off the edges when you clip them off the tree, but they're just slightly too large for the opening there, and you'll have a hard time pushing them in and getting them to go all the way flush. And if you've got that painted at such a tight fit that it may even chip your paint around the edges and everything. So just taking these down a little bit makes them fit a lot better. Over here, this little dorsal piece that goes on top of the saucer right here. This is a 2-piece thing. You got this little spine piece that glues onto this part. Well, this part right here, the spine piece, is too thick, right? And it's supposed to sit down in here nice and flat in this little trench that's made in this plastic. And on every single one of these kits, it does not do that. It's too wide. And So what I do is I just sand down the sides of it, lay it on its side and scuff it down, do the same thing, then scuff on the bottom, and then it'll drop right in there and fit nice. So when you glue it in, it sits nice and in the channel like it should. Then you want to make sure you remove these pin injector marks here from the bottom of this part too. There's some fairly tall ones that are there. Otherwise it won't sit down flush on top of the saucer. So just pointing that out. Now probably the worst fitting issue here is I've got the other part of the chiller grills over here. These have been painted. These don't need to be modified at all. You just want to make sure you sand down the edges here real good and inside, you know, along that channel right there. Then I just painted these that same gray accent color. But these actual grills that go in, the longer one, I've found that all you need to do is sand down the outer edges of it lengthwise. You know, this top edge and this bottom edge, just make them ever so slightly skinnier. I mean, I'm not talking a lot, guys. Maybe one or two, 3 or 4 scuffs across there with some 320, and they'll drop right in and fit nice. But these front ones, they don't want to fit at all. And when you try to put them in there, this thing will try to spread. You know what I mean? And then if you push this inside the nacelle opening there, it fits really tight, so it can't really spread. So what happens is these wind up not wanting to sit down in there all the way flat and flush like they should. So what I did is I had to sand a little bit off the top and the bottom, just like those longer ones. But you'll see that it's got like an inner, on the back side, it's got like a raised, you know, box all the way around the inside of it, where it's supposed to kind of help center it on here or whatever, but that's made too wide. And so that little notch will not allow it to go down in there and fully seat on the inside of these. So I basically just flip these over, lay them flat on my bench, and I take my, you know, my 180 grit sandpaper, my aggressive stuff, and I just completely sand that all the way off of there, right? Now, I'll also point out that while I'm here, we're not doing it on this model, but if you're going to do the if you want to light the chiller grills on this, you do not have to get the clear plastic parts. You can use these regular parts right here. This is what I've used on every single one of mine that you've seen me do the blue lighting with. I just basically do what I just said there. I flip these over and I sand them down, and I remove maybe about 1/4 of the thickness, in other words, on all these parts. Here's that boxed in area I'm talking about that you know, on this back one it doesn't bother, but on the front one it just doesn't fit. But I remove all of that and make these, you know, a little bit thinner than they're supposed to be, and just leave them unpainted. And then I just lightly dust a real light coat of the silver, you know, which happens to be pewter from the craft acrylic paints. Just lightly dust that over the top of it with my airbrush so that light will still go through it, and they light up just fine. You put a strip of double density blue LED tape inside the nacelle, glued to the back wall facing the grills, and they'll light up beautiful for you. In fact, I think they light up nicer than the clear parts, because the clear parts have to be diffused. Otherwise, you're going to see all these little hot spots in there, and they'll usually look like too bright, you know, and they look fake. They look, you know, like toy lights or whatever. But these, you know, being the plastic's a little thicker and everything, and it's not totally clear, it does a really nice job diffusing it and everything. And then, you know, you just need to experiment with how thick you can put your silver on the outside. And if you use a water-based paint, if you spray it on the first time and it's too thick and you know, your light looks cloudy, then just take some water and wipe it back off and do a lighter coat next time and try it like that. You just have to dust enough on there to where you can't see the color of the plastic anymore, you know, and then that's just perfect. It's the same thing you can do if you're doing like you want to do copper color grills. You do the same thing, or like you see me do on the Bassards up here, where I sometimes do them in copper and the light still comes through. You just put a really light coat on there. Okay, so we're ready to put all this stuff on, so I'm going to start gluing it on. Here's the impulse deck, and here's that gray accent color, but I just go ahead and use the you can go out and buy the fancy photo etch parts if you want to, but I just use these regular decals that come with the kit, the grills that go in there. And if you've got your light, you know, diffused a little bit, like I scuff this lens down with some steel wool, double-aught steel wool on both sides, and then I actually take and dust a little bit of white over the top of my little LEDs here in the back too, which are the orange ones, and with my airbrush, and that kind of brings the brightness of them down a little bit. And these grills look great. I mean, the light doesn't go through the decal. You can clearly see the, you know, the framework there and everything. So it gives you just the same effect as if you had the, you know, the photo etch parts in there. And unless you're going to do, you know, the photo etch detail here on the spine and, you know, all the other, I think the other piece you get is, you get the grills up here. Unless you want to do all that, you know, you really don't need the photo etch for anything besides this. So you can just use the decals. But, you know, it's up to you how far you want to go on the detail of your model. So I think that about explains it, everybody. These were painted craft acrylic gunmetal, which is a folk art color. It's a darker shade than over here. And these are those ones that go on the inner pylons. Now I've done the same thing on the pylons there. You can see I've, maybe you can't see it. On each one of these little openings, I just scraped away a little bit of the paint, so we're going to be gluing to bare plastic. And the back sides of these aren't painted. So let me start with, I guess something you guys can see. Let's go ahead and glue these manifolds here on the back. So I'm going to put my glue, not on the part, but on the little, you know, slot itself. So that way, if I'm a little shaky or if I miss or whatever, you know, I'm not splattering glue on the model. So these will just go right down in and snap in place. Basically, these usually always fit really good. I never had any problem with these. They go in with that little kind of pointed area forward. Just want to make sure they're all sitting down there nice and flush and everything as best as they can. Okay, and then we'll do the same thing over here on the other side. My apologies, everybody. I forgot to reset my darn camera again, and right in the middle of that, I ran out of memory. So I just went ahead and finished everything up. You guys only missed a minute or two worth of work there. I just continued on gluing all the little parts in place. We'd already talked about the little modifications we did there, sanding some of these things to get them to fit a little bit better. You can see these grills in here all look really nice. They're sitting all really flush on both sides here of our pylons. We've got the inner chiller grills done here now, and we sanded down the top edges and everything, and they fit in there nice and flat like they should. Then after that, I just kind of continued on doing some more of my weathering. You can see I did a few little streaks here and there with that copper color on the nacelles themselves, a little bit around these back manifolds up in the, you know, up in this area and around the sides here. Really similar to what they've done on the 11-foot model, the way it looks now. We did a couple here, if I can get the light just right, around the, you know, around the sides of the secondary hull, a little bit there by the pylons. Got a few streaks on the pylons, and then around that deflector housing. I've got the lights down so it doesn't glare for you, but we did a few little streaks here on the leading edges of the saucer, kind of typical of what you always see. Nothing overly done, though. It's really subtle. I think it's going to be about the right level that my client Tim wanted. He stated that he just wanted a little bit of a, you know, subtle weathering on this, and I'm glad he decided to do that. I think it always looks a little bit better, like I said. So we're coming along nice here, guys. I'm going to, I think the next step we're going to do, I'll make sure I clear the camera good and everything so we don't have a memory issue. I'm still getting used to this. This is a new camera, new editing software. I promise I'll get better at it, but we are going to go ahead and I think we're going to go ahead and work with the base next and get this all wrapped up. So we'll move over to the other bench. We've got to drill a couple holes in this to mount our switches and a hole back in the rear here to mount our power jack. So I'll take you through all that. We'll install the switches and everything, and then we'll run our wiring up and tie it into the rest of the wiring we had left off there. We got to connect that trigger wire, and we got to connect 2 power wires. Then the model will be all set up and on its base permanently. And after that, we'll see how much time we have left going on in the video, you guys. And if we have enough time where it doesn't get too long, we'll go ahead and add, I guess, the rest of the little details. We can work on the Bassard domes here, and we can put on the little lenses on the top here and the dome and a few little marker lights here and there, kind of little things we got to paint. And this will be getting close to being pretty much finished, you guys. Like I said, at the end of the last video, I'm going to make an addendum video that's going to come back and cover some of the questions you guys asked along the way, and to try to help clarify that, because I've already started another one of these. I've got a saucer off to the side there I'm already working on for the next build, so we'll show you some of that going on with that one with some of the basic wiring. That'll be a separate video after the end of this series that I'll just kind of label it as, you know, extras or something like that. So in the end, my goal for this was to have a complete series that covered as much as I could. And, you know, I just hope it'll help you guys out there that are trying to build these. And, you know, it's an expensive kit to begin with. And hopefully it'll allow you to, you know, save you a little bit of trouble here and there. And some of the ideas I showed you here you can use. And if not, you know, you can come up with your own stuff. But I'm just trying to kind of convey what I've learned through experience on this. And it's certainly not the end-all, be-it-all, guys. There's always optional ways to do things. But so, okay, guys. Well, we'll come back here in just a second and be over on the other bench and get to work on the base. Be right back. Okay, you guys. Well, we're moving right along now. We're back over to the other bench and we're working on the base. I'll show you what I'm going to be doing here. You can see I've punched a couple holes in this already. But this is the basic base that comes with the model kit. Now, I've seen some really cool things that people do with this, painting it up to look like a planet and all that, but we're just going with the basic black base. I think it looks nice with the model just the way it is. And it's actually really sturdy, and the model bounces really nicely on it. When I put these together, I always leave a little bit of extra wire up inside the model too, so that my client, should he choose later on, could mount this on a different base if he wanted to. So this is just kind of get you by. And so what I've done here, you guys, you can see it's the basic base. I've taken my Dremel tool firstly, and I've started off by drilling a couple small little pilot holes. Now, we're using these switches from HDA ModelWorks. This is where I get these. And you can see they're kind of deep, right? They're kind of long. So we want to make sure that when we mount these holes, we put them in the very deepest part of the base right here, right? So you want to kind of go as far in there as you can. That way when they go in from the top, the little terminals here won't be sticking out too far where the base won't sit flat on the table. So putting them all the way up there towards the top, they just barely clear and you'll be just fine. So we've also got this power jack here that Jerry also sells, a nice high quality metal one. And so I've punched a third pilot hole right here. And I'll show you how we're going to drill that out in just a second. But I want to explain these switches. Now we have, what we talked about, we have a momentary switch here, which is, you can tell it doesn't click when you push it. It's just meant to push and release. And that's what we're going to hook up to our trigger wire that's going to control the speed of the you know, bassards on the nacelles that we've showed you. And this one here, you can hear it locks when you push it on and off. So pushing it on, it's locked on. Push it again, it's locked off. That'll be for our power, okay? So what I did here basically is I start off with my two little pilot holes, and then I use this air tool that I have here. This is a little bit unconventional way to do it, but it works good for me. You guys can use a regular drill or whatever. I couldn't tell you what size these are. You can probably put a caliper on there and measure it to figure out what size drill bit you need to drill these out to fit these. But I found that the outer or the thickest part of this little tool right here is the perfect size for these. So I just take this and stick this in the pilot hole and push my way all the way through until I go all the way through, and then I'm perfect. Now for the other one, it's a little bit smaller, so I need to be careful, and I don't want to go all the way through when I do that. I go about maybe halfway or so, and it's the right size. So we'll show you doing that. But you can see when you drop them in here now that you know, they're not bottoming out, they're clearing, and they fit in there really nice. You got these you know, washer and locking nut that you put on from the backside to lock them in place once you get them done. So we won't put those in just yet. Let's go ahead and get the that last hole punched out for the power jack. And I'm going to do it from the inside. That way if I slip or something, I don't scratch my surface. It's going to get a little bit noisy, but this works really good for what I use it for. I got to just be careful not to go too far. Here we go. Sorry for the yelling, guys. My compressor hadn't run all day and decides to run right now when I'm shooting a video. That's par for the course. Okay, so we punched that hole out just big enough, you guys. You can see it sits on there really good. So now we can take and put all of our hardware on. I'm going to go ahead and put the locking screw on the back here for the locking nut on the, for the power jack. Get that all going. Okay, and find my needle nose pliers here so we can tighten this down really good. Kind of have to get a double grip on it here. There we go. Okay, and that's in there good. If you want, you can put a drop of CA glue on there, but I don't do that because, like I said, if my client ever wants to get this apart, it'll be really easy. Now, we've got these two terminals on the back. That'll be for our plus and minus coming in. Now, what I do with these guys, I always check with my my digital voltmeter. Once I hook the power supply up to this, I check with my digital voltmeter to make sure which is which, because I have seen where the polarities are reversed. Normally, the center pole is the plus and the outer one is the ground. But I never, trust that. So we'll check that in just a second here. I'll get the meter out and we'll get the power supply over here. Now, I always like to put the locking switch on the left-hand side here. That's the on-off switch. All right, doesn't matter. You can do yours either way. I'm going to put the washer on there. Get that going. And we'll just kind of temporarily snug him in place here. Alright. Get the other one going on. Get my threads to start there. Which is being stubborn for some reason. There we go. You can probably even find a, you want to make sure these are, fairly straight here on the top. You can probably find a socket that'll fit those too and do that with a little socket wrench, which I'm sure I have. I just have never tried to do it that way. But let's just tighten these up with this old needle nose here. They don't have to be like, like you're bolting on cylinder heads on a, car engine or something like that. These don't have to be super, super tight. You just want them where they don't move around anymore. Get a little bit of pressure on it here. Kind of check our alignment there. Get them kind of squared up. Okay, so we've got our on and off and our momentary just like that. You guys have seen this 1,000 times on my finished models. Okay, so we have that pretty much in place. Now, one thing you want to check, last thing you want to check is take this part down here and twist it, like you're tightening it a little bit, because these are caps that are screwed on here, and I've had a few of them where they were actually loose, and if they're just a little bit loose, the terminals don't make contact on the inside, right? So the switch will act like it's not going to work, or it'll act intermittent where it doesn't work all the time. So make sure those are good and tight, which these are. We're going to take this little tab right here and we're going to bend it over just like that, okay, so that it's not touching. And we just clear, you can see if you look at it from the side profile, we're just going to clear everything on the ground, which is, which it sits on, which is perfectly fine. Now, one more thing we have to do, notice that Polar Lights doesn't hollow this out, so the wires need to come through here. So I'll take my little drill bit on my Dremel tool here, and we'll drill this out real quick. I'm going to kind of hog it out a little bit, not too much. Okay, and then our wires are going to come off of this and around here, so rather than have them go over top of all these ribs, I just take and drill a little hole right through the side in a few spots. Okay, just like that. And then kind of just clear everything out with the hobby knife here. That way we can route our wires through, and they can just come up and go straight into the tube right there. Clean all that out. All right, we'll warm up the solder iron here and get our wire ready to go. Get my scissors over here. I like to clean up in between jobs so everything doesn't start getting really cluttered. Okay, well, we're going to need that. All right. So working with the same, color of wire that I've been going, all this time, we've used the blue for the ground and we've used the yellow for the positive, right? Now, we know what we're going to have dropping through the center of this coming from the model itself. We're going to have 3 wires coming through the pole, which is going to be 2 wires for power and 1 wire for the trigger for our momentary switch here to control the speed on the Bassards. So what I want to do right now is let me get one of my power supplies, and we'll check the polarity on that jack. Grab one of these. Just got a brand new shipment in here, so it'll take me a second. I gotta get it out of the bag here. All right, now I get these online at Amazon. This is a 9-volt, 2-amp power supply, which is more than enough for this model. The model probably draws about 0.7, 0.7 of an amp, so it's more than strong enough to power the model and not have to work really hard. You always want to go overkill on the power supply, you guys. Don't get something that's barely adequate. Because it'll just work too hard. It'll run hot, and it just won't last as long. This thing will basically last just about forever with the load that it's going to have on it. These are about $6, and you can see it's got a nice long cord on it. And I recently started buying these because I like the fact that it has this 90-degree jack on it. The older ones I was using were straight up, and they looked kind of, they didn't look that nice on the base, but now this 90-degree jack, you can see it plugs right in there, has a nice low profile and all that. If you get a square type base later on, it can plug onto the side and the back, and it'll look really nice. So you can see it fits Jerry's jack there really good. So what we want to do is I'm going to plug this in, and I'm going to grab my multimeter here. Okay, and we're going to check the polarity. Now we've got Roger Ramjet flying over you guys. I guess it's just noise day on the videos. Probably about 5 cars will drive by in a minute here too with loud mufflers. So we're going to set this on just any voltage setting. I'm going to go at 20. And what will happen here is if we're hooked up backwards, it'll give me a negative symbol on my little screen there, right? So I'm going to try it the way I think it should be and see what happens. Okay, we're right there. See, we've got the plus in the middle and the negative tab over here, so we're fine that way. Just want to double check that because you could put everything in here. It won't fry the model or anything if you hook it up backwards. It just won't work, and you'll be sitting here, scratching your head going, what's wrong? So we got that little step out of the way, so we can start doing a little bit of soldering. I'm going to get the power supply, out of the way and everything. So we'll start off with this little negative wire here first. And what I talked about, you guys, is on that trigger switch, we had that little jumper wire I talked about. So what I'm going to do right here is I'm going to take this wire and I'm going to put it on the negative terminal. Just a short little piece of wire right here. And we're going to go ahead and pull it through these little holes that we made. All right. And you always want to kind of, I stick my finger on the top to test which one is which so I don't forget. And we're going to come over to the, I need to drill one more hole here. I forgot. I got to go one more. Just through the side bulkhead here. Okay. Let's clear that little flash out of there. All right. Now I'll pull it through this hole. Let's kind of route it behind this other switch here. Try to do a nice, kind of a nice neat job if you can. All right. Pull a little tighter. And now we're going to go to one terminal on this momentary switch here. It doesn't matter which one. They both work the same, right? So this wire is going to stay in here permanently, so it doesn't have to be extra long. So I'm going to trim that off a little shorter, and I'm going to go for this terminal right here on this side. And we'll just kind of get that on there and wrapped around. Grab my little tweezers here and get this nice and tight. And then we'll be soldering these in just a second. Okay, so we can kind of have that one in there like that. Maybe pull a little bit of this slack back so it's kind of all equal. All right. So now when we bring the wires from the ship, or when we go up to the ship from here, we'll take a wire right off of this, which will be, I used a blue wire here because it's the ground coming off the ground, but I'm going to actually use a yellow wire on the other side. I'll go straight up into that hole right there, up the tube, into the model, and that'll connect to our trigger wire, those two little connections that we just made there a little while ago where we got the bassards working, and I showed you that you touch on the ground. Those two wires right there. You'll see it. We're going to show you, those getting soldered onto the ship here in a minute. But that wire is going to basically go straight up to that. So let me go ahead and run this through. And I want to leave this wire, plenty long. So we have extra slack like I talked about. We'll just tuck that up inside the model itself. That way the model has plenty of room to be able to pivot and all that and not bind up the wires. And my client can always extend these wires out a little further if he wants later on. All right. So we'll connect this one now to the other side of this, the other terminal here. Okay, so let's go ahead and solder those two. We're done with that basic switch right there. Okay, those should be fine. I'll wait a second here and give them a good pull. Yeah, they're in plenty good shape. So that wire you can see just goes straight up in there like that. Okay, that will feed up through the tube into the ship. All right, so now we've got these two, we've got to have power to the ship, right? So now we're going to go for this center terminal over here. I'm going to tin this first and get a little bit of solder on it. Okay, and then we're going to take and use some of our yellow wire, because this is the positive side on that. Okay, I'm just going to double this over so we get a double. And we'll just connect that onto there. Okay, that's good. We gave it a nice pull. It's all set. And I'm just going to make this one really long. Well, actually, no, we're not doing it that way, guys. Sometimes I confuse myself. This one's going to come over to the switch, so we'll cut this off about like that. All right. So we're coming off with power over to the switch. Oh, I missed one of the holes. Route it through these little guide holes here. Okay, so you can see that, get these all tucked out of the way. I haven't soldered this one yet because we're going to connect one more wire on there, you guys. We've got this little wire coming off of our power then, right? So you can see that this is where the jack comes in. This is where our power is coming in. So we don't want the power going straight to the model, otherwise it would be on all the time, right? So all we're doing is by installing this switch here, we're interrupting the power whenever we turn the switch off and on. We're interrupting it on the plus side, okay, of the two wires that are coming in. Not the ground, but the plus. So this wire connects on this side of the terminal. And we'll get that all tightened up there. All right. And that one can actually be soldered at this time. Remember that tip I talked about way back where I solder whenever I make a connection? That way I don't forget, and if I have a loose one later on I can't find it. Okay, so now we'll have the two power wires that go up to the model, right? We've got a ground and a plus, right? So the ground from the model is going to come and hook onto this same terminal over here. This is our ground for our power coming in. So I'm going to go ahead and connect that wire. Again, that'll be an extra long wire, a blue one. Bring that out the bottom. I'll probably go in easier this way. There we go. Okay. And we're going to pull that all the way through and just run that right over here. And connect this onto the ground lug. All right. Now this one can be soldered. Okay. Just kind of tuck everything in nice and neat there. All right, so the last wire that we need, guys, is a power wire for the plus side. So I'm just going to grab a little bit more of this yellow, push it up through. Plenty long where can go all the way through our tube and all the way out the front of the ship. And we'll kind of chop him off right about there. And now this one connects to the other terminal on our power on and off switch. And we'll solder that one. Okay. Get this down in here all the way flush. And again, we're going to be leaving some slack up inside the model. So you can see now that these wires all go up inside the ship. I just have to make sure I pay attention to on these two blue wires, which one's that goes to the basic ground for the power in the model, and the other one's the trigger wire, which I'll figure that out. So you can see, guys, we're all set up underneath of here. That's all there is on the bottom side of this. Now when we plug in our jack, we'll have power. These two wires will feed. So let me just kind of re-explain this one more time. So we've got our plus and minus coming in from this jack right here, right, from the power supply. Plus being the yellow, blue being the negative. So that plus wire is coming across here off of the jack directly over to our on-off switch, which is interrupted because we're breaking the circuit right here with this switch. If this wire went straight to the power on the model, it would power the model up all the time, like I said. So by pushing this switch on and off, all we're doing is breaking the circuit on the plus wire, and that shuts off the power to the model. Okay? So then once the power gets up inside the model, everything comes on. Now the ground wire, we've got one wire here that's the ground for the power to the model that's coming over here and coming straight up and going straight up the neck. You know, the mounting rod directly into the model, the same as this plus wire that we've got connected to this switch. So that's our power. Now the third wire here, which is our trigger, it's coming off of this ground, right? And it's not going to ground all the time because we're interrupting that with this switch over here, this momentary switch. So it comes across here, goes to one terminal. The other terminal on the other side feeds up and goes to the model. So we're interrupting that. Now if we didn't interrupt that, that ground would be happening all the time, and it would cause the the speed control and the thing to go bonkers. But now anytime we just push it one time, it gives it that signal that we're looking for and tells the Bussards to change speeds. Okay, so now what we're going to do next, guys, is we're going to bring the actual model over here, and we're going to connect up the wires up in through the mounting rod and into the last two connections that we have on the model itself, and then that'll be it. That'll be 100% done on the wiring, and it'll all be then we'll be able to put our power jack on there and power this thing up. It'll be on its own power. Be right back with that. Okay, well, let's go ahead and connect up our 3 remaining wire connections here, you guys. So I figured out what these are. I've got my power here, which is the blue and the yellow, and I've got the trigger, which is set off to the side over there. So you can see we've got our 2 little power lugs here. We're going to start off by soldering those together. So we've got yellow to yellow. Let's go ahead and pull this up here and wrap this one around. And then we've got our blue that goes to the blue harness. So that's our plus and minus. And we'll go ahead and get those soldered up. Alrighty, we've got that. Now we'll put a little bit of our heat shrink tube over this. Go ahead and seal those down. Just fold that over, that excess. All right, so those are good and sealed up. They won't touch anything or short out on anything. Now we've got this last one here, which is our trigger. So you can see we've got that one labeled over here where we left off. Remember, we marked that with a T. All right, so we'll pull this tag and connect that one up. It's a little bit too long. Now, we're going to tuck these back inside anyway, so we'll just leave that. We'll have a little extra slack there. Okay. So now we'll have a circuit whenever we push the momentary switch there. Now the speed will work on our, the speed control will work on our nacelles, which we're going to show you that in just a second. Always a little dark underneath of this big saucer. Okay, let's finish up with this last piece of heat shrink tubing. All right, now the final step that we'll do here, guys, is we're going to kind of neatly bundle all this up. I'm going to take some of these zip ties right here and do that. And but before I do that, I want to check and make sure. Now our switch must have already been on. Yeah, so we hit the power switch now, and you can see that everything comes on the model. Okay, all of our lights, everything's going. Our bassards are going. Now let's test out our momentary switch. Okay, we slowed down, we speeded up, we went to another speed. So I think there's I can never remember. There's either 3 or 4 speeds on these boards, but you can see we're super fast right there, a little slower yet, and that speed. So I think there's 4 speeds here, you guys. But anyway, you can see it's functioning perfectly. They're both in sync, and it's working much better than it was when I was trying to touch the wires on there earlier. Okay, so we're ready to close this up. I'll just go ahead and pull the power supply off there, and we're gonna tuck our wires. You know, we left this little bit of slack. We're just gonna tuck our wires up in there, and I'm gonna take these 2 groups right here and get those off to the side. Then we're just gonna kind of bundle these up. All right. Make a couple of folds here, like that. Just kind of take that group there and just kind of squeeze it all together. So yeah, if I was ever, you know, I'm not anticipating any kind of problem. This will most likely last a lifetime, but should some kind of a problem occur, you know, and if it's not 30 years from now and I'm still alive and the client needs to send it back to me for some issue, I'll know exactly what I've got going on in here, and it'll be easy to get to it right at the front, just behind the deflector dish housing. Okay, so we're just gonna bundle that up real nice. Clip off the excess piece here. And take one more and kind of hit the back side here. I think we're gonna get away with just needing 2 of them. Okay. Something like that. Okay. And now I'll just kind of neatly, let's fold it under. And we want to, when we push these wires in, you guys, we want to stay in the, you know, kind of in the lower, this section right in here. Just keep your wiring right in there, and it won't interfere with any of the windows or everything. And then make sure all the wires are away from that lip. So when we stick the deflector housing in there, you know, it doesn't pinch any wires or anything. And then we're all set. Okay, so let's try it again. Whoop. Help if you have the power supply plugged in. There we go. Power to the lights, power to the bassards. Our little momentary switch is now working. So I hope that was understandable for you guys. And again, you can always ask me, you can always leave a question in the comments section if there was something there you didn't quite get. But that's about as straightforward as I can make it, you guys. Just follow those simple steps right there. And that's the final stage for doing all of our wiring. So now we got our base all set up real nice. The model will stay on top of the base. And what I'll do now is we're going to move on to the next step. I'll put the camera back on the overhead view, and we're going to start putting in all of our little detail parts. The very last thing I do is the deflector housing. So we've got some lenses to put up on the top. We've got to put the bridge dome on. We've got to put on the Bassard domes and the little dome at the back here by the shuttle bay. A little bit of fiber optics. So we'll come back with that in just a second. Be right back.